Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. I've got my good buddy here, Chris Alo, and you know why he's here. We've been talking about doing this show for a long, long time. This is the history of Judas Priest, one of the most influential, popular, long-standing, what else can we talk about, heavy metal bands on the face of the planet. The Priest juggernaut has been going strong since the very early 70s. Actually, their history even dates back prior to that. But they, in my opinion, took the framework that Black Sabbath kind of put on the world and took it on a different path and really formed what we now know as, like, you know, the leather and chains heavy metal, right?
Absolutely. That's what the one thing I was going to add, Pete. You nailed it at the end. The besides the sound, the twin guitars, the aesthetic of heavy metal. You know, the Judas Priest as a fashion sense. And I would argue in rock and roll, I would think the two most influential bands as far as getting people to wear leather jackets are the Ramones and Judas Priest.
Yeah, you're probably right there. Yeah.
And yeah, they really just shaped that look of denim and leather. Besides everything that they've done musically.
Yeah, well, because as much as the image was kind of a big part of it, how about that music, huh?
Absolutely, and they would have been nothing without the great songs.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
absolutely, and it's, as always, it's an honor to be here with you, Pete.
So happy to have you.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Chris and I, we were also plotting another show once we get this one out of the way on another very, very popular and groundbreaking band named Iron Maiden, but that's for a later date. We're very excited to bring this to you. We may do this in two parts. We're going to see how it goes time-wise. So we got a lot to talk about. So Chris is going to give us a lot of kind of like the historical data behind the bands. We're going to talk about the albums. We're going to talk about eventually solo albums. We're going to show some merch and cool fun stuff, and then we're also going to tell you our 5 favorite Priest albums at the end, and we're going to have a separate show where we're going to do top 10 songs, all Judas Priest. Sound like a plan? I think so.
That sounds like a plan, Pete.
So this little band started back in, what's the actual first date that this band...
I don't actually have the date that they first got together, but it was sometime in 1969-ish. It's a little murky. Of course, the band actually started without any of the original members that we know. Band was technically formed by Al Atkins, the original singer, and a bunch of other guys. It's kind of does make me laugh because whenever it comes up about, you know, Judas Priest, the history and when they actually started, Priest books like to say, oh, well, you know, that was a different Judas Priest. The real Judas Priest started with KK Downing. But listen, there was a band called Judas Priest that...
and that wasn't their first choice of a name, right? They had some other names.
Yeah, there was a couple other names.
Bad names, really bad names.
It was the 60s, so... but KK Downing joined the first ever show with KK Downing in that version of Judas Priest, which eventually becomes the version of Priest we know, is March 16th, 1971. They were doing shows in England. I didn't know this until I got the KK Downing book, which I have somewhere around here.
Here it is.
There it is.
That bad boy, yep.
Heavy Duty by KK Downing, which I would absolutely recommend if you're a Priest fan. He said that a booking agent called IMA started getting them gigs in England, and I had no idea. But IMA was owned by Tony Iommi. And KK mentioned that he doesn't actually even remember meeting Tony at the time. But in the early 70s, Al Atkins and the drummer quits. And I don't even remember who the drummer was at the time. Of course, the Spinal Tap took the revolving drummer door from Priest. And KK Downing's girlfriend was friends with a go-go dancer named Sue Halford. Her brother, of course, was Rob Halford, and Rob and the drummer John Hinch were from the band Hiroshima. So the two of them joined Priest, and Glenn Tipton came in from the Flying Hat Band.
That's right.
And joined Priest, and that sort of became the Priest that the band, the version of Priest that everybody knows.
Well, they look like a bunch of hippies, though. I mean,
yes, the look was definitely quite different.
Halford had the long, straight blonde hair. KK was wearing like hats and like bell bottoms.
Oh yeah, I mean they really look like something out of a Jimi Hendrix video.
Yeah.
Which is no surprise because KK Downing was a hugely influenced by Jimi Hendrix. And May 9th, 1974 was the first ever Judas Priest show with Glenn Tipton. So that's the solidification of the classic Tipton, Downing, Hill, Halford band. And
to put it in perspective, so that's 1974. So you figure by this time, Sabbath is up to what? Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath? Am I right about that? Deep Purple is releasing the Burn album.
Right.
Zeppelin has already got Houses of the Holy out. So just to kind of put it in perspective, where Priest sat in the pantheon of like the heavy metal greats, right? Or that came before them. So it's just interesting. So go ahead, continue on.
And one thing I thought was really interesting that I found out in the Priest book was Priest gets a management company by a company called MMA, and one of the people that was at the top of the food chain at MMA at that time happened to be Rod Smallwood, who would later go on to manage Iron Maiden to obviously a very successful career, and still manages them till this day. But the first actual Priest record was Rock-a-Rolla. Came out September 6, 1974.
Not with this album cover, though. Most of you probably know the one with the bottle caps on the front.
Yes, which mirrors the Coca-Cola logo, which, according to Wikipedia, that said that had to be withdrawn. I have a copy of it somewhere.
I don't know. Actually, no, I had the LP, but on CD.
Me too. I have the album somewhere.
So I'm not sure if you guys can see this, but that shows you what the band was looking like at the time. Pretty unrecognizable compared to what we would know Judas Priest later on. But a solid album, I think.
Yeah, it's a pretty good record. I hadn't listened to it in a long time.
It gets better with age, because I think in the old days I was kind of like with this album, but I would say half this album is very, very good.
Yeah.
Kind of bluesy, heavy rock. Some of it's a little dated sounding, but One for the Road is great. What is it? The Deep Freeze is a great tune, as brief as it is. I know it's kind of housed within like a couple little like mini suite there. Run the Mill is great.
Run the Mill is very good. My favorite song on this album is Cheater.
Cheater's very good.
I always wanted to hear them either re-record it or play it live, and they apparently they talked with Ripper about playing that one live. To me, that's the most classic sounding Priest song on the record. But Never Satisfied they did on the Epitaph tour.
Yeah, that's quite
and
good.
Halford did it solo a couple times. But yeah, it was produced by Roger Bain, who did the early Black Sabbath records.
Yeah.
And Bain apparently made some decisions that the band didn't agree with, and so the sound is a little bit muddy.
In fact, they didn't have any good things to say about him after that.
Oh yeah, that was a one and done. Yeah. Of course, the Coca-Cola album cover they hated. 3 songs were co-written by Al Atkins, and "Victim of Changes" was a mashup of 2 songs. One was from Al Atkins. I have it in my notes. Whiskey Woman, and I forget what it was, but Halford had a song, and they sort of mashed them together to come up with Victim of Changes. But it's a good record, not a great record. The band doesn't really acknowledge it as their first record, and a couple of places I don't know if I have it here. Yeah, Tyrant, Genocide, and Ripper. The Ripper were all written by co-written by Al Atkins, but
his imprint is on a lot of those early songs.
There was a couple tracks that Roger Bain decided to leave off and until the second record, and of course a couple of those songs wound up being some of Priest's more well-known tracks.
Yeah, ironically enough, Al's a pretty cool guy. I've dealt with him a little bit over the internets. You communicate with anybody nowadays, and he basically, you might think that someone in his position who was helped start this band basically, and then left before they got really big. Might be a little bitter. He's always actually been pretty cool with this.
Yeah.
I'm sure deep down inside he's probably wishing, man, that this might have worked out. But, it just wasn't meant to be at the time. And I think he's always been kind of on the periphery of what the band's doing, always wishes them well. In fact, from what I heard, he still talks to KK and whatnot. So that's kind of cool. And I think he has a relationship with Halford. So pretty cool. But very different vocal styles.
Yeah, I saw him actually in concert in the early 2000s. He came over, in New Jersey.
Really?
Yeah. He came over for a couple of the New Jersey Metal Meltdown festivals. And surprisingly, he was really good. He sounded great.
Everything I've heard
He did a bunch of early Priest songs.
He's got that kind of like gruff, like thing going on. And it's very different from Halford, but I kind of like his vocal style.
And he was really good. But overall, Rockarola did pretty poorly for Priest
Gull Records,
overall. Right? Yeah, it was Gull Records, and the band just carried on from there.
Yeah. So the second album kind of is where everything really fell into place for the band, and for most long-time listeners and fans of Judas Priest, I think their second album really holds a special place to everyone's heart because it's just got so many classic tunes on it. I mean, the production might be a little lacking, in my opinion, but I think the songs are just so iconic. And of course, we're talking about Sad Wings of Destiny.
Yeah.
Man, just top to bottom, it's hard. It's, so much greatness on this album.
It's a great record. The band really considers it their first album at the time. Their sound-wise, it was really a mix of sort of like Sabbath and Purple with a heavy shot of Queen.
Yeah.
And but it was a really good record. It still really holds up to this day.
Yeah. I mean, when you got songs like Victim of Changes and The Ripper and Tyrant and Genocide and Island of Domination, and I didn't even list everything, Dreamer, Deceiver, and all that kind of stuff. It's just hard to deny the greatness of this album. And I think specifically, and again, I was just listening to this today, as a matter of fact, again, for the 1000th time or whatever, Halford's vocals on this album. Now, again, we had an Ian Gillan, we had a couple of, Plant and whatnot, but some of the upper registered shrieks that he was doing on this album, right?
Just to this day, it's incredible.
Pretty groundbreaking stuff,
I
think, at the time.
Definitely. Just amazing stuff. This was, Alan Moore was the drummer at the time.
Yeah, so the drum chair was constantly a little bit of upheaval.
At this time, they did record Diamonds and Rust from Joan Baez, but it's not on the record.
Nope.
And they were having major issues with Gull Records. I don't remember what the number was, but it was something like they were living on one meal a day. It was something really small that they were getting per week to live on. And somehow they got the attention of somebody at CBS Records. And thankfully, somebody at CBS gave them a recording contract.
Yeah, because if you go onto YouTube and you look up, like, there is some live footage, or maybe it's TV footage of the band in 1976 touring this album. They all look really, really thin. So they obviously weren't making a lot of money or eating much at all. I was watching, I think it was Dreamer Deceiver.
Dreamer Deceiver, from the Old Grey Whistle Test.
Yeah, they all look real thin in that.
Oh, yeah.
Big time. But how cool is that video?
Oh, it's great. Thank God that they did do some appearances. But yeah, the band was very poor. The deal that they signed off on was that they would receive, they had received no royalties from the first two records, and they would receive none. Gull kept everything. And they moved on, but obviously that was the right choice.
It's just like a story here.
Yeah,
so many
very
bands,
common.
Right? Yeah,
Gull put out many compilations of the first two records, including one in the, I guess this was early 80s, Pete?
Yeah, I think so.
Hero, which is all of Rockarola, and it has the demos for a couple tracks that wound up on the second record.
Cool album art there. So CBS, so we kind of fast forward now.
CBS comes in, and
Early
Sin
77.
After Sin comes out April 8th, 1977. Produced by Roger Glover from Deep Purple.
Now, you listen to this compared to Sad Wings of Destiny. I mean, the compositional-wise, very similar type stuff. But man, the production on this is like leagues better.
Oh, absolutely.
This is a huge sounding record. And again, you look at Sinner, okay, Diamonds and Rust, which you talked about before, Starbreaker. What else is a Raw Deal?
Yeah.
Dissonant Aggressor.
I was just going to say Dissonant Aggressor. Covered many years later by Slayer.
Yep.
It's a great track.
Last Rose of Summer. Here Come the Tears. Some really, really strong material on here, and you could easily 3 or 4 tunes on here that would become like pre-staples for decades to come.
The interesting thing with the production, it was CBS that wanted Roger Glover to produce the record. Priest wanted to do it on their own, so they actually sort of parted ways with Roger Glover.
Yeah, they weren't really happy.
Yeah.
Didn't he come back into the fold yet?
they worked on the album for a little bit longer. Apparently they got nowhere, and then they sort of had to ask him to come back.
Yep.
And thankfully he did, and got the record out that they did. And who's the drummer at this time? It was...
is it Simon yet? Or?
Yeah, Simon Phillips.
Simon Phillips.
They fired Alan Moore, and they brought in Simon Phillips to do the record.
And Simon Phillips was, I believe, like 19 years old at the time. Simon Phillips was a nobody back when he did that album. And we all obviously know Simon Phillips has gone on to great things since then.
And they wanted him to join the band permanently, but he had other commitments. So then Les Binks, the famed Les Binks, who everybody always talks about in such high regard, he comes in to do the touring, and he was a friend of Roger Glover's. And Sin After Sin is also interesting because it's the last Priest studio record to have the old school Gothic font on the album cover.
That's right. Yeah, that you can see. I got a little bit of glare there.
K.K. Downing said in his book he did not like the Last Rose of Summer, just like he didn't like Epitaph from the previous record. He felt they sounded too much like Queen.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
But, this is a band trying to get their identity, right? They're really trying to individualize themselves, and which they did. Absolutely.
And one of the big shows that they did on this run was opening 2 dates, opening for Led Zeppelin on the Day in the Green in California. It was Led Zeppelin, REO Speedwagon, Ted Nugent in front of, it looks like 45,000 people.
Wow. Pretty cool lineup.
Yeah.
Because even you might wrinkle your nose at REO Speedwagon, but they were a pretty serious hard rock band.
Yeah, they were a rock band back then.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, this was 1977. I mean,
it's commonplace back then. We don't see that stuff anymore. At least not here.
No,
here
a real mixture. Even just festivals anymore. I mean, it's there's a few the Rock on the Range and Rock Allegiance and a few others, but that's definitely not like it used to be.
No.
But yes, Sin After Sin, it's a good record. It's definitely
one of my favorites.
It's showing Priest where they were headed for sure.
Right, and where they were headed was probably for many fans their magnum opus, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Or damn close to it. So what do we have? So we're fast forwarding to about a year, right? So they're at this point they're pretty much a year between albums.
Yeah,
right?
Pretty much. This was. Sin After Sin was April 77, so Stained Class was February 10th, 1978.
An amazing album.
Yeah, a fantastic album.
What do we got here? Exciter.
Which many cite as, the first speed metal song.
Right? White Heat, Red Hot, Better By You, Better Than Me, which of course was a Spooky Tooth cover and done very, very well.
I didn't know for years.
And the original was great too. Really, really good.
Which I later heard, but I had no idea.
The title track, Stained Class, is great. Invader, Saints in Hell. In fact, side 2 is just unbelievably good. Savage, Beyond the Realms of Death, Hero's End. I mean, come on.
Yeah, just a fantastic record.
Yeah. And again, we talked about this at the top of the hour, but I almost think that this album is the beginning of kind of like the modern day of heavy metal as we would kind of know it in the late 70s into the 80s. As much as Sabbath kind of was the blueprint to this, this took it to another level.
I would definitely agree. I guess is right before the new wave of British heavy metal really hit.
Yeah.
And Priest
Where
always...
would that have been without this album or any of those couple that came before?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a hugely influential album. Les Binks, the drummer at the time, co-wrote, which I didn't know this, co-wrote Beyond the Realms of Death.
Yeah, I heard that in Pop-Lo's he talked about that. Yeah.
They did a UK tour at the time with English Assassin and a US tour. I found this really interesting with Mahogany Rush.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I thought that's pretty cool. I thought that was fascinating. K.K. Downing wrote in his book at the time, and I always thought that Tipton and Downing always got together like peanut butter and jelly. But in the book, K.K. said that this is where things started to get a little weird. And
that's early on.
Yeah, so early on.
Wow.
K.K. said that he didn't like the fact that Glenn Tipton decided who got to do what solos. And K.K. claimed that Glenn got to do much more time-wise of soloing than KK was, and he said that Glenn did all.
And also, he's still kind of the new guy, right? So
technically, yeah. I mean, KK, was there before him, and they didn't do a ton of touring at the time, apparently, because for whatever reason, Sony Records wanted them to hurry up and get back in the studio, which is interesting, and I guess we should have mentioned that all these records, other than Rock-a-Rolla, they all have gold certification in America, which is unbelievable.
Maybe not at the time, or you said
right?
Right?
Yeah,
okay,
not at the time. But since then they've all been certified gold, which is...
Well, I think what it was is that people started to really notice them. We're going to get into it, but British Steel and Screaming for Vengeance, I think, really opened up eyes to people who never heard them before.
Absolutely.
But also they toured here with Kiss. They toured with Rush. I mean, all of a sudden they started touring with some really name bands here, and I think that just kind of helped things out.
Absolutely, yeah. It was really the next record where things really started to skyrocket for them. But yeah, just Stained Class, just a great, overall, just a fantastic record.
Yeah, it's legendary in my opinion. It's, like I said, we've been talking about what I feel are 4 almost unmatched albums in the history of heavy metal. There's just 4 classic albums that, when you think of Judas Priest, you can't not think of these albums. Just my opinion, of course.
No, absolutely. I agree 100%. I mean, where would the world be without Judas Priest? I mean, the world of hard rock and heavy metal, they've, their influence is just undeniable.
Yeah, I mean, Sad Wings to this next album we're going to talk about are just filled with memorable Priest classics. And so we fast forward again. Did they get a year in between, or is this later in the year?
It's later that same year. Okay. Well, there is 2 different versions.
Releases. That's right. Yeah.
Sony wants them to hurry up, so the Killing Machine record gets released in the UK in October of 1978, but the album does not get released in America until February 28th, 1979. With a different name, right? Of course, called Hellbent for Leather, with an extra track.
Yep. So this is the UK import that I have here. So you'll notice it's called Killing Machine. However, I grew up and owned the LP, which was called Hellbent for Leather. The reason why 2 different names is because in the UK, the record label did not want to release it with the title Hellbent for Leather.
Killing Machine.
Oh, exactly. Yes.
Apparently, there was a school shooting.
So in the U.S., they didn't. Killing Machine was like, no, can't do that.
Right. Apparently, there was a school shooting, which is crazy to think of now.
It's commonplace now.
Commonplace now, but in 1978, there was a school shooting, I think, in Ohio, and that's why in America they were against that title. Yeah. But just an amazing record. It's I know we're not getting into this now, my personal all-time favorite Priest record. Songs are definitely, they're getting away from the progginess of the earlier stuff.
This is more of a straightforward record.
Right.
So, yeah.
Songs are shorter, more direct.
Rock Forever, Running Wild, Delivering the Goods. Hellbent for Leather. I mean, it's great stuff on here. And I think shorter songs, you got a little little more of a modern approach, because again,
Definitely.
we're looking at late 77, early 78, and you can definitely tell there's a little bit of a different shift in the songwriting from this album to the one before it, Stained Class, which I think is a darker album. Like you said, a little bit more of a proggy edge. You know, it's arguable. You talk about like the history of progressive metal, and you know, a lot of people will cite, you know, early Rush and Rainbow with Dio, and you probably could throw Priest in there a little bit, I think.
Oh,
right?
sure, absolutely, absolutely. And lyrically, there was a lot of different themes going on. Like you know, Rob started to write about some of the S&M sort of things on Burning Up and Evil Fantasies.
I think this was kind of the start of the denim and leather and chains
yes.
period, right?
This
Basically
is,
here, right?
Yep, that was it. It's in the K.K. Downing book. I don't know if I believe it, Pete, but K.K. Downing says that he felt the band needed a better image than they had, so he claims that he's the one that took Rob Halford to a leather S&M store. I don't know if that's true or not. You know, I'm
Why would anybody
saying,
lie about that, though? You know what I mean?
True,
right?
but
So,
but he did. He
well, might be a
claims in
good
his
way to
book,
sell books. So you know, who knows?
Totally. But you know, you have to wonder too. You know, 1978. You know, punk rock was starting to take off.
Yeah.
So did that influence, you know, writing shorter, more direct songs, simpler songs? Also, you know, punk rockers had leather and stuff. So it's debatable, I guess, but it's interesting that the you know, of where the band was headed, and at this time, this is where the leather and the studs came in, and it changed the look, of heavy metal.
Now they weren't yet headlining, at least here in the States. I don't think at this point.
I think at this time they were starting to do smaller venues. I don't know if I have it in my notes here, but yeah, they believe they were starting to do. I know at this time, Hellbent for Leather-ish, they started to do shows at the Palladium in New York City.
Right.
And they did a few headlining gigs there.
But they also I think this was the time where they started touring with bands like Kiss and UFO and Rush and what have you.
Yes, right, because it was Priest on the Dynasty tour, right?
Yeah.
Was the opening act.
Yep.
So yeah, things were definitely starting to move. Hellbent for Leather was definitely a success. And Priest was going to the next level. And over in Europe, they were doing a lot of TV shows.
Yep.
They were making appearances all over, and things were starting to move for them.
Yep. Time to talk about the iconic live album.
Sure, absolutely.
All right.
Unleashed in the East comes out September 17th, 1979. And again, these dates, I mean, I got these off Wikipedia. Are these the U.S. dates or the U.K. dates? I'm not sure, but I believe the releases, the only one that really had quite a difference was Hellbent for Leather.
Yeah, Killing Machine. Yeah, that was a couple months there.
But this was recorded in Japan.
So what I have here, this is the Priest in the East release. So they reissued this, a decade ago?
Yeah,
something like
I want to
that,
say like 2001.
with a handful of extra tracks to try, because I always thought, now this has always been one of my favorite live albums, and we can talk forever about how live it actually is or not. I mean,
right.
Let's be real. They did some doctoring up in the studio, but it's almost as perfect a live album as you can get. And I don't know about you, but I'm of the opinion that most of the songs that appear on here are better on these versions
absolutely.
than the studio versions. Not that the studio versions suck by any means, but man, powerful.
Yeah. Powerful, a crispness to it.
Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, I would argue the point. I think it's the greatest live album, the greatest live metal album of all time. I know tons of people would cite Kiss Alive. Tons of people would take Strangers on the Night. For me personally,
are those really metal albums though? You know,
well, metal, hard rockish.
Yeah.
But for me personally,
well, just think of that time period though. You had Unleashed in the East, you had Kiss Alive and Kiss Alive 2, you had Strangers in the Night, you had Thin Lizzy's Live and Dangerous, Deep Purple Made in Japan. We can go on and on and on.
Yeah.
I mean, so many essential live albums from that period. And here you have at the end of the decade, this monster comes out. I remember when this came out, I had this on LP, and I played this to death.
Yeah,
to death. And I remember at the time, like the version of Genocide on here, killer.
Lethal.
Killer.
And what I love about it, this as a live record, as opposed to any other live records at the time, it doesn't have the long solos, the intros, the outros.
Didn't need it.
This is all killer and no filler.
And Halford on here is like
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Now, K.K. Downing did say in his book that Rob was sick on the Japanese tour. So K.K. Downing claims that the only thing that was really doctored up was the vocals. Okay. He said that he claims that Rob re-recorded the vocals.
All of them or parts of them? Or who knows at this point, right?
Yeah, I don't know how much.
They're great regardless.
Regardless, yeah. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But it sounds great. It's great too that they finally did re-release it worldwide.
Because it always should have been a double album, or
yeah.
At least longer than it was. So here, and again, I don't have my glasses on; it's hard to read. But a bunch of extra tunes on here that
I think the 4 tracks that were cut was "Rock Forever,"
yeah,
"Delivering the Goods," "Hellbent for Leather," and "Starbreaker,"
which are great songs.
Yeah,
and just make this so much of a better live album than it already was. So I was so happy when they finally released this in this format.
Oh yeah,
the extra tunes. I'm like, man, this is how we always wanted Unleashed in the East.
Totally. And there was actually other songs that they recorded on that tour that haven't been released yet, but maybe someday. The band was doing unbelievably well. They did a tour at November and December of '79, opening for AC/DC.
That's right.
And
I forgot they were opening
if you have a careful eye when you watch the Let There Be Rock movie, they show a poster of AC/DC, and on the bottom it says Judas Priest. And
Special guest,
yeah.
That's
and
cool.
K.K. Downing wrote in the book that they got along really well with Priest, and he felt, of course, I'm sure, horrible when Bon Scott passed away shortly afterwards.
So
and Rob Halford claimed that the influence of AC/DC was to write even catchier, more direct songs than they had already have.
Yep.
And, of course, that would influence the next record.
British Steel. And also note where they believe, I think they came out within a couple months of each other. Scorpions' Tokyo tapes also came out right around the same time as this. And what a 1-2 punch of live metal greatness.
Huh? Yeah, just another amazing live record. And this one, if I'm not mistaken, is platinum in America. And this is when they parted ways with drummer Les Binks.
Yes.
And
much to the dismay of many people.
Yes, who many people to this day still wish he was in the band. I remember reading somewhere that he had some kind of contract with Priest, and they came to him. He went to them for more money, and they actually said, "Well, we're going to put out this live record, and we want you to sign off on it, and you're not going to get paid."
Yeah.
And that was a real problem from him. Of course, no surprise, and so he wound up quitting.
But from what I read, they were upset that he quit. And it's like, but they kind of forced his hand, right?
Right. And they just kind of moved on.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a management thing. Yeah, there was no ill will with the rest of the guys in the band. It was management that took this upon themselves, and the band was doing better. Like, they had more money. Why couldn't you just pay the guy?
Pay the guy. He's a great drummer.
Yeah, great drummer. Of course, the replacement, which we'll get
from
to in a minute, probably, I guess, didn't go. But this is the first. I mentioned it went platinum. This is the first of 5 Judas Priest records to go platinum in the United States, which is unbelievable. I mean, other than Metallica, is Judas Priest the most successful heavy metal band as far as platinum and gold records in America?
Yeah, well, especially in that time period, because you had like.
But I mean, overall, we'd
have to look at it, right?
We'd have to look at it. I mean, if we're talking true heavy metal,
so
and we're not talking Kiss and Rush and Zeppelin
and Purple,
Motley Crue and Purple.
Sabbath arguably could be there. They had that run, but I think that's a pretty long run.
Yeah, maybe it would be Sabbath.
Yeah,
it's close.
Maiden had a long run,
and Maiden had some great ones too. But I don't think Maiden has 5 platinum records in America.
Yeah, I don't know. They had at least 3 or 4. But maybe
they definitely had a couple.
Yep.
But yeah, an awesome live record. My favorite live album of all time.
Good stuff.
And that leads into
so talk about shorter songs and what have you. A more commercial sound that brings in British Steel.
Released April 14th, 1980.
Yep.
Dave Holland, like you said.
Dave Holland from Trapeze comes on board. Maybe not the best choice, but I think at the time they wanted a guy who can just kind of hold down the fort.
Right.
And he was not a very technical drummer, but they
It
didn't
worked.
mind that. I think they
Right.
wanted, because I think Les Binks and certainly Simon Phillips were more of a technical drummers, and they wanted something a little bit different because obviously they were moving in a direction where they were going to do more straightforward songs.
Right,
And
absolutely.
they felt he was a good choice and good, solid drummer. Nothing wrong with him. And this would be, a pretty big hit for the band.
Yeah.
And of course, spawned a couple songs that will forever be played by Priest as long
on
as
FM classic radio.
Yeah.
I mean, to this day, the local radio station WPDH in our area plays "Living After Midnight" and "Breaking the Law"
all the time.
I mean, it's
as if there's nothing else on this record worth
Yeah.
playing. Right?
It's true. I mean, you'll never hear The Rage or Steeler, but
Rapid Fire,
the two radio
Metal
hits.
God, you might have heard off of this, right?
Yeah,
At some point,
the two radio hits. Yeah, they play them all.
Yeah.
But this is the record that broke the band.
Yeah, and I think probably for maybe the casual Priest fan, I would say this album and Screaming for Vengeance are probably like the most popular album to someone who's not like us, who has every record and has seen them live a million times. And I'll tell you personally, I'm not a huge fan of this album. It's okay. I think maybe it's one of those albums I've heard way too much, and the lines for me are a little blurred because of those two songs. There's actually there's a couple other really, really great songs on here, but I find that this is one of the couple Priest albums that I really don't play much at all because I've heard it so much. Back in the day when it first came out, I loved it.
Right.
Because I remember buying this, when it came out, and I was like, awesome. But
I agree. I mean, I still listen to it, but I always skip
those two tracks.
Living After
Yeah.
Midnight and Breaking the Law because I'm just so tired of them.
But some other great stuff on
Yeah,
there.
I mean,
United, I have no use for either anymore.
Yeah, not. But Grinder is one of
Grinder's
my
great.
all-time favorite songs.
I love Rapid Fire as well.
Rapid Fire's a great one.
Yeah, Steeler's a great tune. The Rage is kind of a different tune, right?
I do. The little reggae-ness to it.
Yeah.
I definitely love it. We should mention that at this point, the band was working with. This is the second record they did with producer Tom Allen, who had a huge hand in shaping the sound of the band, and
for years to come.
Yeah, really, took them on their most successful run.
And how about that iconic cover, right?
Such a great cover.
Yeah, that's.
They toured North America at the time. This is unbelievable. This lineup: Judas Priest, the Scorpions, and Def Leppard. I mean, wow, what an incredible lineup. They did a UK
this was
tour.
Def Leppard On Through the Night. This was Scorpions, probably Love Drive, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna say
Right?
that. Right? It had to be Love Drive. Yeah.
Because Roth was out of the band by then.
Yeah.
So it had to be Love Drive. So I wonder, did Michael Schenker tour with the band or just do the album? I don't remember.
I don't know if he actually did any shows.
I think he just
did
did
the. I think he did the.
Because you know what? In 1980, he had already done the first MSG album. So he probably did Love Drive and then moved on. So Matthias is in.
Right, because they're, So that makes total sense. And K.K. Downing talks about, in the book, this is where the rift started between Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. Long story short, there was an interview with Iron Maiden in Melody Maker magazine, which was a British publication, and it was in advance of the UK tour with Maiden opening for Priest. And long story short, and I don't remember who it was in Maiden, but somebody was basically talking shit about the fact that they were going to blow Priest away on the tour.
Cocky back then,
they were very cocky, but K.K. Downing took offense to that. And to me, it's pretty interesting because very recently I had come across an old interview with Rob Halford from the 1979 tour where he was saying how Priest was more of a straightforward rock and roll band, and on the Dynasty tour, Kiss was really going to rely on their theatrics. So to me, I'm like, but wait a second. Halford was saying the same thing a year ago.
Just a year before,
Shouldn't Kiss have been mad at you guys? I mean, to me, I found it very funny.
Kind of petty, right?
Yeah. And there's also a story that Priest was rehearsing for the tour. I guess it was one of the first dates on the tour, and the guys in Maiden came in unannounced, and they didn't ask permission, and basically just stared down Priest while they were playing. And KK Downing had to call the road crew over and kicked them out.
Wow.
So
blame it on Deano. It doesn't seem like something Maiden would do.
Well, we'll get to that. Again, this is all stuff that from the KK Downing book.
Right.
That's why if you're a Priest fan, you should absolutely read it because it's got lots of great nuggets on things like that. But yeah, British Steel, man, what a great record to this day. It's it's a 5-star classic. I think Rolling Stone had it as number 3 on their top 500 heavy metal albums of all time, and it's the accolades on the record are just unbelievable.
Cool. Where we go from there? Oh, by the way, just to show you, so the British Steel is reissued. Here's the reissue. This has a bonus 30th anniversary DVD. Live stuff, kind of cool.
Yeah, I have that in my notes too. That they did a tour in 2009, and we'll get to that later. But yeah, they did a tour in 2009 where they played all of
the entire
British Steel from start to finish.
Yep. So from British Steel, obviously popular album, sales are good, got a couple singles. I think the band and the record label is kind of liking all this exposure, and they wanted to kind of strike while the iron was hot, right? So the idea was to go out to do another record that was probably even more commercial than that one.
Absolutely. That
right?
was probably the plan.
Yeah, so of course that resulted in this Point of Entry. A couple different album covers on here. This,
that's the British,
right?
Yep,
Yeah, the UK
that's the
release.
UK album.
This album came out, and kind of a lot of the fans were like, what is this?
Yeah.
Right? Little light. Little poppy, little clean and shiny.
They went for a more radio-friendly commercial sound. At the time, right? The Foreigners and the REO Speedwagons, which were all Journey, that all stuff. That was all riding the airwaves, and yeah, I'm sure somebody got in Priest's ear or just themselves.
Yeah,
they wanted to blow up, and it was a successful record, but yeah, certainly a bit of a misstep.
The momentum kind of was stalled a little bit.
Yeah, they did not have the monster radio hits that they had on the previous record.
No, but I think heading out to the highway, probably close and should have been that song. And Desert Plains is good. I mean, there's some good
material. I always like Solar Angels.
Solar Angels is good. Hot Rockin' is kind of fun, but it's kind of silly at the same time. What else we got on here? Troubleshooter's not too bad.
Troubleshooter's good, but there's a couple throwaways. You Say Yes, All the Way.
Don't Go is yeah. Desert Plains is a great tune.
Yeah, love that tune.
That probably for me is the
Priest
one
classic.
Great tune on here.
Yeah.
There's a couple pretty good songs and a couple kind of lame songs. So
I always think Dave Holland's shining moment was that little fill in the middle of the song, that 2-second fill. But yeah, some good tunes did not do what they wanted it to do.
The loyal fans were pretty taken aback by this, and they kind of like, wow, this is not the Priest we were kind of wanting, right? And
totally.
I think the record, like you said, the sales were pretty good. Did this go platinum, or it eventually made platinum?
It did go.
Eventually, I think at the time it might have only been.
At the time, I think it just went gold, but it did eventually go platinum. I put in my notes that the touring cycle they did is one of the most bizarre things that I ever heard of. And Priest had a weird thing too that I kind of forgot, that they would come up with like different sort of names for the tour. And they called this the Worldwide Blitz Tour. I'm not quite sure. I don't know how that has to do with anything, but I thought that was interesting. But the routing and the time of the touring just made me really scratch my head. So they start off the tour. They do a 3-week European tour promoting the record, but then they took a full 7 weeks off. Like, what?
Yeah, let's further kill the momentum.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Then they did a massive 3-month North American tour, which I'll get to in a second. Then after the 3-month U.S. tour, they took off 3 months. Just 3 months of no activity. And then they did another 3-week European tour.
Yeah, that's kind of bizarre.
Just baffling.
For the time, too, because I remember I was regularly going to concerts back then. And these bands were pretty relentless getting out there. Really, album out, you tour for a year at least, or at least 8-9 months.
Totally.
There's no breaks.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, like, once you get the machine going, why are you putting the brakes on?
Yeah.
Between the road crew knowing how to take the stage apart and the band wanting
I'm surprised the record label allowed that to happen. That's when it's kind of puzzling when you think about it.
Very strange, very strange. But yeah, my note, the Savoy Brown supported the band for the first month of the tour.
Weird.
Which is a weird one.
Yeah.
And then how about this one? And I'm like, wow, in 1981 they did this? Humble Pie was the co-headliner with Judas Priest. I'm like, wow, Humble Pie was that big in 1981?
No, they weren't. They had been broken up for years. So this was probably when Humble Pie, probably not, because Steve Marriott was a mess at the time, and I think he had no money, and he was he was an alcoholic going through all sorts of problems, and I think this was a time where they kind of put together some weird version of Humble Pie.
Gotcha.
But the fact that they would make them a co-headliner, because really Humble Pie were dead and buried at the time.
Right.
It's kind of sad, but that's weird.
Iron Maiden was the opening act. Again, another tour with Iron Maiden. Whitesnake jumps in at some point to do co-headlining. And then Joe Perry comes in to come up to open some dates as well. So really interesting mix of bands that they were touring with. But again, that Maiden connection, which again KK did, was not really.
And there's more of that.
Yeah, and there's more of that to come. But yeah, Point of Entry, not the greatest record, but not the worst.
No, not the worst. It's not terrible.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's got a couple good tunes.
But of course, they were to rectify that whole
Yes.
thing, right? They were to come back with a vengeance, right?
Yeah, they were able to rewrite the ship.
Yep. With this screaming, trying to be funny here, but with this amazing album called Screamer for Vengeance, which basically revitalized the career of the band in a big, big way, and back to the metallic roots of like some of their, mid-late 70s stuff, but even more metallic, I think, than even some of their early stuff. This was like early 80s, metal, full bore, screaming ahead, and I remember when this came out, me and all my other metal friends were like, holy crap, because this, at the time, was pretty damn heavy. And
no doubt. This was my Pete's only got a couple years on me, but this was my introduction to Priest, because my sister, got the cassette and put up Judas Priest posters on the wall, and I was like, wow, what is this? But yeah, it was a game changer for sure.
Yeah.
This was really bringing heavy metal to the masses. Released July 17th, 1982. Yep. Peaked at number 17 on the U.S. Billboard charts. Went gold in October of 1982, which is pretty quick. Platinum in April 1983, and then double platinum in October of 2001.
Which is pretty interesting when you think about it. It just shows you how much times have changed. So it peaked at number 17, but went double platinum.
Yeah.
Crazy, right?
Crazy. And it's the only Priest album to be certified double platinum, although it hasn't been certified since 2001. I am sure it's probably sold multiple times over. Yeah. Again, they toured now with Iron Maiden, with Bruce Dickinson.
Yep. I saw them on that tour. Pretty damn cool. Yeah.
That's one of my Time Machine shows, Pete. If I could go back in time, but yeah, you're right with the Diano thing. But it's in the KK Downing book. I don't know if I wrote it. If I wrote it down, he said that they were, of course, now Bruce Dickinson is touring with Maiden on the Number of the Beast tour, and KK said that Bruce announced to the audience during the show that Maiden wouldn't be playing the next night because Judas Priest screwed them over.
Wow.
And also at this time, now Maiden were selling really, really well, of course.
Yeah.
And they were there was some kind of demands that Maiden had on the stage setup. And there was a certain amount of room that Maiden was saying that they had to have, and they were saying that they weren't getting it. So the Judas Priest stage crew had to build some kind of special stage platform for Iron Maiden to meet their demands, and this just incensed KK Downing. Yeah. He couldn't believe that the opening band had the gall to make these demands on the headlining band.
Now, granted, Maiden were pretty
and
up
Maiden
and
were
coming
blowing
at the time.
up at the time.
So, but yeah, that is kind of preposterous. I would think to an older guy like KK at the time, right? Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
What I always found fascinating too, that this was the record where North America embraced them so much,
big time, yeah.
They completely ignore the rest of the world. Judas Priest does 111 shows on the
everywhere.
Screaming for Vengeance tour, and they were all in North America.
Yep, they were everywhere. I remember that. In fact, I think, if I remember correctly, they played the Garden, the Meadowlands, and the Nassau Coliseum all within like a short time, and they were everywhere.
Yeah,
all over the place.
Yeah, you couldn't. All over the radio. You've Got Another Thing Coming.
Yeah,
was the huge radio hit.
I remember being a kid, and because this was '82, so I was 16 years old. I remember putting that LP on and hearing the first 1-2 punch of the Hellion and Electric Eye, and I was like, "Oh my God!" And then Bloodstone and Riding on the Wind and the title track and You Got Another Thing Coming was all over the place. And this was a big record.
This was a massive record. My introduction was the video. Watching the video of Priest playing in some industrial park with all the lasers, and there's some guy that's walking around, and it's unbelievable that MTV didn't ban this.
I know.
But the guy's head explodes from the guitar, from KK and Glenn. There's some guy, his head explodes, and as his head explodes, his pants drop. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's like the best video ever.
Yeah.
But it's amazing it didn't get banned. But MTV played the hell out of it.
Yeah.
That was my introduction to Maiden, to Priest rather. And at the time, Maiden was also getting tons of airplay.
Oh, big time.
On MTV. And we should mention the tour ended March 1983. They had a break, and then they played the US Festival.
That's right.
Which is arguably the greatest one-day heavy metal event of all time.
So that was all Van Halen, Triumph. I'm trying to remember who else was on that.
Van Halen, Triumph, Quiet Riot, Motley Crue,
that's right.
Ozzy Osbourne, Judas Priest, and the Scorpions.
Scorpions, that's right. Yeah.
And Motley Crue, I believe, I can't remember if it was Motley Crue or Quiet Riot, were the last-minute replacement for Joe Walsh. I don't know why Joe Walsh was on Heavy Metal Day, but somebody quickly rectified that.
I love Joe Walsh, but that's not for him.
But the Priest plays in front of 300,000 people.
I remember seeing Halford sweating up a storm up there because Halford, of course, he started to take stuff off after a while. At the beginning of that show, man, he was wearing everything. It's like,
man is in full black leather in the summer sun, and the show was shot on video. And thankfully, it was re-released it was released finally, I should say, on the 30th anniversary of Screaming for Vengeance as a bonus DVD. So if you were going to buy Screaming for Vengeance, that's the one to have.
Because showing your copy there.
Well, this is the remaster version. I had the band sign
signatures on there.
At one of the times I've interviewed them. I do have let me see if I have the. This is the 30th anniversary edition, and this is the regular edition on CD. Luckily, I was able to do lots of Priest interviews over the years, and I've done more Judas Priest interviews than any other band. Halford, Tipton, Downing, Ian Hill.
I need to get this one.
That's definitely for the DVD. It's definitely worth having. But yeah, I mean that was just an unbelievable, groundbreaking record for them.
Yeah, I think so. So many classics on that album. A couple tunes on there I'm not nuts of, but I like. But I think
I got to say, the other day I was wrapping Christmas presents. And I put this on, and I was, I shouldn't say surprised because it's one of my favorite Priest records, but I was like, wow, I was still really into it. And the only song...
Side 2 it loses a little steam on Side 2.
I was going to say, really the only song that I kind of wasn't thrilled with, listening to it again for the millionth time, was Fever.
Yeah, I'm not crazy.
I mean, I love Devil's Child. Electric Eye, Riding on the Wind, Bloodstone. Even Take These Chains. Yeah, Pain and Pleasure. That one I'm not,
Yeah.
But even You've Got Another Thing Coming, I was still like, oh, this is so great.
I'm kind of tired of that too.
Yeah, that one I guess I'm not sick of yet. But yeah, great record. And yeah, probably they're still their
signature album.
Their signature album.
Yep, yep. And they follow that up not too long after, right?
Yes, very quickly.
Yeah, very quick.
Because May 1983, they did the US Festival. Oh, and I should say, this is Bill Kerbishley comes in as their manager. At the time, he was managing The Who, Robert Plant, and Jimmy Page.
Wow.
And it was his idea to get them right back into the studio right after the US Festival. So the band literally flies to Spain from the US Festival and gets right to work on the next record, which is unbelievable considering what bands do today.
Exactly. So in a lot of ways, Defenders of the Faith is kind of like Screaming Part 2.
Very much so.
Right? I remember when this came out, and again, it came out pretty quick. I remember how surprised I was how quick it came out. And it just felt very familiar. Right? Because, I instantly loved this album because it was so similar to this.
I mean, even the album cover is similar.
Yeah, it's
the same artist.
Yeah.
It's heavy, but yet, the songs are catchy and straightforward. I love it.
Burning. Yeah, I'm still a big fan of this album.
Those are,
again, a couple kind of somewhat mediocre tracks, but I think some really, really strong material on
here. Very, very strong
Jawbreaker,
material.
Free Will Burning, Rock Hard, Ride Free. I could have done without Some Heads Are Gonna Roll. That's probably one of the tunes I could have done without.
Which actually they didn't write, right? That was
exactly.
Bob Halligan Jr. It was weird that they had, he wrote Take These Chains Off on the last record.
Yep.
So I guess they went back to
why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, in this instance, Some Heads Are Gonna Roll was actually a minor hit for them.
Yeah.
And the fact they played that live quite a lot over the years.
And on that particular tour, on the Defenders tour, they played every song except Eat Me Alive.
Yeah, which is a good tune.
Which is a great tune. Yeah. And they would later play it many, many years later. So the only Priest records that have been played in its entirety was Defenders of the Faith, British Steel, and the first record. Although, the side note being Defenders of the Faith was never played, all at once. They did 8 songs from that, 8 or 9 songs on that tour with Eat Me Alive, but they did play Eat Me Alive, in I think 2009, I want to say. But, I love it. I love Defenders of the Faith.
The Sentinel's a great tune. I remember seeing them on this tour, and you had...
I wish I could have...
You had
I had another couple of years.
Bathed in Light playing the intro to it, and it's just
awesome.
It's really, really cool. I have really good memories from this tour, and of course they had the big props in the background.
The album cover was reproduced as the stage setup.
Yeah.
Screaming for Vengeance, they had a very simple stage set for Defenders was when they decided to really put a lot of money, and so many bands at that time were putting do big stage productions.
Yep.
And it was.
I'm pretty sure I caught them multiple times on this tour, and I remember they had different opening acts for each show because I think
they had Great White on one of
Great
the legs,
White,
and I want to say Kick Axe.
Or was it Accept? I think wasn't this the close to? I think Accept were on one tour briefly.
You would certainly know better than me, Pete.
Or maybe it was Loudness. Geez, that guy. It was definitely Great White. In fact, I was at one of the shows where the fans ripped up the seats.
I think I have the.
That was crazy.
The date that was at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
And that particular show got Judas Priest banned for life. And the story is that after the show. Tipton and Downing went to a tennis match at the Garden, and some security guard came over and said, "Hey guys, thanks for the new seats," because Priest had to pay something like $250,000 and the Garden got all new seats.
It was crazy. I mean, these seat cushions were flying from every which way.
Yep, there was June 18th, 1984 was Madison Square Garden.
Yep.
And for the touring was Ted Nugent and Raven on the European leg, and Great White and Kick Axe on the North. Now again, this is from Wikipedia.
Yeah.
I didn't see Priest yet.
Well, I definitely saw him with Great White. I saw Accept opening up for Priest at some point. I just don't remember when it was. Maybe it was Turbo. I don't remember when the hell it was. Here's the 30th anniversary edition.
Yep, which that one is really good because it has a double live record recorded on that tour. They did an unbelievable show at that time. This was the Rock Pop Festival in Dortmund, Germany. Heavy Metal Day was Iron Maiden, Scorpions, Ozzy Osbourne, Def Leppard, and Quiet Riot. So pretty similar to the US Festival, but in Germany. Eat Me Alive, of course. And this is the oral sex record because it's what Jawbreaker, Eat Me Alive, and Love Bites. We're all. At the time when I got the record, I didn't realize any of this.
But, we don't care.
But Eat Me Alive was listed as number 3 on the PMRC's Filthy 15.
There you go, the PMRC.
I remember reading the Tipper Gore book, How to Raise PG Kids in an R-Rated Society. And there was a whole thing on Priest, and she was just like, oh, they are the worst. And, there was a picture of Priest with some groupie, and, there was just... it was a slight bit of controversy at the time. But yeah, the band did not tour that much. They did some European shows, but again, North America was really the focus.
Yep. Yeah, they were all over the place those years. So that's going to end part 1 of our history of Judas Priest. And actually what we've talked about was pretty much the glory years. Okay, so now in our part 2, we're going to kind of go into, and actually they had plenty of sales and things like that in the ensuing years, but I think it's kind of like the second wave of Judas Priest's career that saw lots of ups and downs and then a resurgence again, but really fascinating stuff. So sit back, grab something to drink, something to eat, and get ready for part 2. We hope you enjoy it. We'll see you all momentarily.